I woke up that morning with a strange heaviness in my chest, the kind that sits quietly but refuses to leave. At 75, I've learned to listen when my heart whispers. Most days, I ignore the loneliness and the long stretches of silence inside my house, convincing myself that everyone is simply busy. But that morning, the silence felt wrong. Too loud, too empty. Perhaps that's why I decided, for the first time in years, to visit my daughter without calling. I baked her favorite oatmeal cookies before leaving, the same kind I made when she was little. The smell of cinnamon filled my kitchen, comforting me, reminding me of a time when she used to cling to my apron and sneak cookie dough when she thought I wasn't looking. I placed the cookies carefully in a small tin box and wrapped my scarf around my neck. The autumn air had a sharp bite to it, but I didn't mind. I have survived many winters. My bones are used to colder things. The taxi ride across town felt long, every turn of the road stirring old memories. My daughter, Emily, my only child, had been distant lately. She still answered my calls, but her voice always sounded strangely rushed, as if speaking to me had become a task she needed to finish quickly. I blamed her busy schedule, her job, the kids I never got to see anymore. Mothers are good at lying to themselves when the truth hurts too much. When the taxi pulled up in front of her house, I smoothed down my coat and checked my hair in the window reflection. I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach, like I was about to meet someone important. I suppose a mother always sees her child as someone important, no matter how old she becomes. I stepped out slowly, gripping the cookie tin tightly. But the moment I looked up, something inside me jolted. Parked neatly in the driveway, right in front of her porch, was my husband's car. I froze. My husband, Richard, had told me he'd be out of town for a 3-day meeting. He had even packed a suitcase the night before. I remembered watching him close the zipper and kiss my forehead, telling me not to wait up. Yet here was his car, unmistakable, a deep green sedan with a dent near the back bumper that he always swore he'd get fixed but never did. For a moment, I simply stood there, confused. Maybe he had come back early. Maybe something urgent happened. Maybe he was surprising Emily. My mind grasped for innocent explanations like a drowning woman reaching for floating debris. But the deeper part of me, the part that has weathered storms, betrayals, disappointments, felt a warning. A quiet, cold warning. I took a few careful steps toward the house. Their curtains were partly drawn, leaving a sliver of view into the living room. My hand trembled slightly as I approached the window. I didn't intend to spy. I only wanted to understand, to breathe, to calm the strange panic rising inside me. But before I even reached the window, I heard voices, familiar voices. Richard's low laugh, Emily's hushed whisper. The sound of them together, without me, sent a chill through my spine. They weren't arguing. They weren't startled. They sounded comfortable, at ease, like two people sharing a private moment. I pressed closer to the window, my heart thudding painfully. I clutched the cookie tin to my chest as if it could protect me. Then I heard it. A sentence so sharp it sliced through my world. But that was only the beginning. Everything I knew was about to unravel. I should have walked away the moment I heard their voices. A decent person would have knocked, announced her presence, and pretended she heard nothing. But I suppose betrayal has a way of drawing you closer, pulling you like a magnet toward the very thing that will break you. I leaned gently against the wall beneath the window, holding my breath so I could hear clearly. I still prayed I misunderstood, that the strange heaviness in my chest was only my imagination. But the next words that drifted out into the crisp autumn air stripped away the last bit of denial I had. Did she sign the new papers? Emily asked, her voice low but unmistakably eager. My stomach turned. Papers? What papers? Richard let out that familiar, dismissive chuckle. The same one he used when speaking about things he considered beneath him. Of course she signed them. She never reads anything. She trusts me. They were talking about me. A cold numbness spread through my fingers, making the tin box shake slightly. I pressed it harder against my chest to steady my hands. Emily sighed, a frustrated, impatient sound. Good. Because we can't wait anymore. The real estate agent said the market is perfect right now. Once the house is in our name, we can put it up for sale immediately. My breath caught. My house. The home I had lived in for 48 years. The home where Emily took her first steps, where every wall held some memory of my life. I felt my knees weaken, and I steadied myself against the siding of the house. But there was more, Richard continued, his tone colder than I had ever heard when directed at me. She's getting too old to manage the place anyway. Frankly, she should have moved into an assisted living facility years ago. This will be better for everyone. Better for us, Emily corrected bluntly. Once she's out, we can divide the money. You get your half and I get mine. My heart cracked at the sound of her voice, my daughter's voice. The child I had raised alone for many years when her father worked long shifts. The girl whose scraped knees I kissed, whose nightmares I chased away. The young woman I sacrificed for, worked 2 jobs for, protected from every hardship I could. Yet here she was, speaking of me like a burden. A problem. Something to be removed. Richard scoffed. She won't resist. She's too gentle. And even if she does, what can she do? She's old. No one listens to old women. I closed my eyes as the words slammed into me like a blow. Old. Useless. Helpless. A burden. They were describing someone they believed I had become. Then Emily spoke again, softer but far more poisonous. If she refuses to move out, we'll make it difficult for her. She won't last long living alone. She'll have to give in. I covered my mouth to keep from gasping. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was plotting to push me out of my home, to force me into a place I didn't want to go. Tears blurred my vision. I felt them dripping onto my hands, warm against the cold afternoon air. I wanted to scream, to knock on the door, to confront them. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. My voice wouldn't work. I could only stand there, trembling like a brittle leaf caught in a storm. Inside, they continued talking, laughing casually, as if discussing the fate of a stranger. Not the woman who gave them everything. At that moment, something inside me broke. Not in a way that destroys a person, but in a way that hardens them, reshapes them. I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding but strangely steady. The betrayal had cut deep, but beneath the pain, something else began to rise. Strength. Determination. A silent promise. They believed I was weak. They believed I would simply crumble. But they had forgotten something important. I may have been 75, but I was still me. And I had survived worse storms than this. The sweet revenge they never saw coming had already begun to take root. When I returned home after leaving Emily's house, the sun was lowering itself into the horizon, staining the sky a deep orange. Normally I would have paused to admire the colors. Age teaches you to appreciate simple beauty. But that day, I walked past the sunset without seeing it. My legs carried me inside, but my mind was still outside Emily's window, replaying every cruel word I had heard. I closed the door behind me and stood in my silent living room, clutching the cookie tin that now felt unbearably heavy. The cookies I had baked with love earlier that morning suddenly felt ridiculous. I set the tin on the table with shaking hands, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to cry, quietly like I always have. Not dramatic, not loud, not messy. Just soft, steady tears that fell as if they understood the weight of the betrayal better than I did. But after a few minutes, something inside me shifted. I straightened my back, wiped my face, and whispered to myself, enough. I had spent my entire life being gentle, patient, understanding. I stayed quiet during arguments, forgave quickly, apologized even when I was the one hurting. Maybe that's why they thought I was weak, because I rarely raised my voice. But silence is not weakness. Silence is observation. And now that I had seen the truth, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. A young woman named Grace, sharp-eyed and surprisingly kind. When I walked into her office, she offered me a gentle smile, something I didn't realize how badly I needed. "How can I help you today?" she asked. For a moment, my voice trembled. I almost said everything was fine. A lifetime of swallowing pain doesn't disappear overnight. But then I remembered Richard's laugh, Emily's calculating tone, and the way they discussed my future as if I were already gone. So I told Grace everything. Every word I overheard. Every strange document Richard had asked me to sign over the past few months. Every moment Emily brushed me off or rushed me through paperwork she claimed was just routine. Grace listened intently, then asked to see any documents I still had. I handed her the folder Richard insisted I never worry about. She scanned the pages, her expression stiffening. "Mrs. Turner," she said finally, "these aren't routine forms. These are property transfer documents. If you had signed the last one he planned to bring, your house would legally belong to them." A pulse of nausea rolled through me. So they really were trying to take everything? Her nod was small but firm. "Yes. But we can stop them." Those 4 words steadied me. Grace helped me revoke every document I had signed under false pretenses. She froze all potential property transfers, placed legal protections on my estate, and filed a notice preventing anyone from altering my ownership without my consent. Then she gave me advice that I hadn't expected. Start collecting evidence. Evidence. A word so sharp it could cut. Over the next week, I began gathering everything, quietly, carefully. I wrote down every detail I remembered from the conversation at the window. I found old financial statements and compared them to the newer ones Richard had handled. I placed a small recorder near the phone, capturing his calls when he spoke to Emily. Neighbors confirmed something else, something that twisted the knife a little deeper. Richard had been visiting Emily's house often, always when he told me he was working late. Every revelation hurt, but it also fueled me. They thought I was old. They thought I was fragile. They thought I would simply fade away. But as each day passed, I felt myself becoming stronger. Not younger, but stronger in a way that mattered. By the end of the week, I wasn't just preparing to protect myself. I was preparing to finish what they had started. And they had no idea that the quiet woman they underestimated was about to change everything. The day I had been planning finally arrived. I had sent out invitations to Emily and Richard for a family dinner, careful to frame it as a casual, celebratory evening. They accepted eagerly, oblivious to the storm that awaited them. They believed I had no idea, that I had no power, that I was still the frail, trusting woman they had spent years underestimating. How wrong they were. I spent the morning preparing the house. Not with cookies this time, but with a careful attention to detail that came from decades of experience. Every corner was neat, every light soft, every chair positioned perfectly. I even baked a fresh batch of cookies. But this time it was for myself, a small reminder that I had survived and thrived despite everything. When the doorbell rang, I opened it with a calm smile. Richard and Emily stood there, arms linked, faces bright with anticipation, completely unaware that they were walking into the trap I had set. I greeted them warmly, invited them in, and gestured to the dining table where the first course waited. It wasn't until they sat down that the first surprise appeared. Grace, my lawyer, was there, along with a few officers I had coordinated with in secret. Their expressions shifted from polite curiosity to panic within seconds. I could almost hear the gears turning in their minds, trying to understand how this quiet old woman had orchestrated such a gathering without them suspecting a thing. "Emily, Richard," I said softly, pouring wine into their glasses. "I hope you don't mind me inviting a few friends to dinner." Richard cleared his throat nervously, his usual smug confidence evaporating. "Friends? Well, that's unexpected." Grace stepped forward. "Mr. Turner, Emily, we have a few things to discuss. You see, Mrs. Turner has gathered evidence regarding attempts to transfer her property illegally, including recent documents signed under false pretenses and recorded conversations. These actions constitute fraud." Emily's eyes widened. "Mom, what is?" I raised a hand gently, silencing her. "Don't call me Mom, Emily. You haven't deserved that for a long time." My voice was calm, even, but the steel beneath it made Richard flinch. The officers presented the evidence I had collected, every document, every recording, every witness statement. It was undeniable. Every plan they had devised to strip me of my home, my life, my dignity, crumbled under the weight of truth. Richard's face went pale, and Emily's hands trembled as they realized the gravity of their actions. They had assumed I was powerless, that age had made me irrelevant. But here I was, standing tall and victorious. "I suppose this explains your recent visits," I said softly, glancing at Richard. "All those meetings, Those late nights trying to make decisions behind my back. Emily opened her mouth, stammering excuses that sounded hollow even to her own ears. Mom, we didn't mean. Save it, I said. Betrayal is betrayal, and actions have consequences. Grace explained how their access to my estate was now blocked, how they were legally cut off from any claims, and how further attempts could lead to serious charges. My house, my money, my life. Everything they tried to steal was untouchable. I watched them leave afterward, faces pale and pride shattered. No yelling, no tears, just quiet defeat. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a calm satisfaction that warmed me from the inside out. Revenge had never been about cruelty. It had been about justice. About reclaiming what was mine. About showing them that strength doesn't disappear with age. After the door closed, I sank into my favorite chair on the porch, wrapped in a soft blanket. The evening air was cool, but the fire of triumph kept me warm. I gazed at the horizon, the last light of sunset casting gentle colors across the sky, and I realized something profound. At 75, I was free. Free from betrayal, free from manipulation, and finally free to live for myself. I sipped my tea and smiled. The quiet woman they had underestimated had not only survived, but she had won. And that, in itself, was sweeter than any cookie, any compliment, or any moment they had ever taken from me. In the end, it wasn't just revenge that healed me. It was reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my life. And for the first time in many years, I felt truly unshakably and wonderfully at peace.